Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Alex.
And I'm Morgan. Thanks for tuning in. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2025.
That's right, kicking off another week. Let's get you a quick snapshot of what's happening out there, starting with the weather right here in Sacramento.
Looks like a beauty today. Sunny skies, expecting a high around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty typical for July here.
Yep, classic Sacramento summer. Nationally, though, it's a bit more active. Keep an eye on central Texas. There's a moderate risk of excessive rainfall, and flash flooding is already happening in some spots.
And up in the plains, an enhanced risk for severe thunderstorms. We're talking potentially severe wind gusts and some damaging hail, so definitely stay weather aware there.
Also, flood watches are up in the mid-Atlantic thanks to Tropical Depression Chantal moving through, and no surprise, the Southwest is dealing with some pretty extreme heat. Stay cool out there, folks.
All right, let's check the markets from Friday's close. The Dow Jones finished at 44,632.13. That was down about 0.38% for the day, or 171 points.
But looking at the week since last Monday, June 30th, it was actually up 1.39%, adding back about 611 points. So a bit of a mixed picture there.
Yeah, similar story for the S&P 500. Closed at 6,252.54, down just 0.1% on Friday, about 6.5 points.
But for the week, up nearly a full percent, 0.96%, gaining about 59 points.
And Bitcoin closed at 108,135.21. It was down 1% for the day, losing about $193.
Still, for the week, it managed to gain just under 1%, 0.92%, up around $990 since last Monday. Still hovering around the $108K mark.
Definitely. Okay, sports fans, specifically Giants fans.
Yes. Some good news. The San Francisco Giants beat the A's yesterday, July 6th. Final score 6-2. Nice win.
Yeah, Hayden Birdsong got the win for the Giants. Pitched really well.
Good to see. And hey, Tyler Soderstrom for the A's did go 2 for 4 with a homer. So, credit where it's due. But the Giants got the W.
Always good to beat the A's. Yeah. All right, and before we jump into our main stories, a special shout out to all our new listeners tuning in from Florida. Welcome aboard. Great to have you with us.
Absolutely welcome. Okay, let's transition now to the core of today's show, connecting the dots on the big tech stories from our morning star, the Snarful Tech article report.
First up, a story that, as you said, just screams AI gold rush. We're talking about CoreWeave, the cloud and AI infrastructure firm, the one backed heavily by NVIDIA.
Right. They're making a massive move.
Huge. They're set to acquire Bitcoin miner Core Scientific.
A Bitcoin miner. Okay, tell me more. This sounds interesting.
It's a roughly $9 billion deal, all stock, expected to close later this year, probably Q4 2025.
$9 billion. That's a serious number, even in tech deals. What's the structure?
Well, each Core Scientific share gets converted into 0.1235 CoreWeave shares. That values Core Scientific at about $20.40 per share.
Okay, and how does that compare to where it was trading?
It's a big premium, like 66% higher than where the stock was late last month. So a significant offer.
Wow, but why? Why is an AI infrastructure company buying a Bitcoin miner for $9 billion?
It's not really about the Bitcoin mining itself anymore. It's about the infrastructure, specifically the power.
Ah, okay, the power.
Exactly. This deal is designed to wipe out over $10 billion in future lease expenses for CoreWeave over the next 12 years. They basically get to stop renting and start owning.
Owning what specifically?
Owning access to power. They get about 1.3 gigawatts of gross power capacity from Core Scientific's data centers. That's a massive amount of power, which AI just devours.
So this really connects the dots, doesn't it? It shows this massive scramble for power. Bitcoin miners built these energy-hungry sites, signed power contracts, and now that infrastructure is gold for AI companies.
You nailed it. That access to power is the key asset. And it's an incredible turnaround story for Core Scientific, too.
How so?
Well, they started out as an Ethereum miner, remember? But then the merge happened in 2022. Ethereum changed how it worked, and that model wasn't really viable for them anymore. They had to pivot.
Right. They shifted towards AI hosting and infrastructure.
They did. But it wasn't smooth sailing. They actually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in late 2022. Bitcoin prices had fallen. Energy costs were soaring. It was a tough spot.
I remember that. But they emerged.
They did. Early 2024. And now, just over a year later, this $9 billion acquisition. It's quite the comeback.
From bankruptcy to a $9 billion exit, that's something else. And this wasn't totally out of the blue. relationship-wise, right? They were already working together.
Correct. CoreWeave and Core Scientific already had 12-year contracts in place. Core Scientific was providing 200 megawatts of infrastructure for CoreWeave's high-performance computing stuff.
So they knew each other, liked the setup, and CoreWeave decided to just buy the whole thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And analysts like Brett Knobloch at Cantor Fitzgerald pointed this out. It's all about access to power. He also noted CoreWeave was already funding the $1.3 billion build-out for that lease capacity.
Funding it? How?
He called it basically an interest-free loan to Core Scientific.
Yeah.
So CoreWeave was already putting up the cash, letting Core Scientific expand, and now they're just taking ownership.
Makes sense strategically. How did the market react initially?
A little mixed, actually. CoreWeave shares dipped about 4% in pre-market trading when the news broke. And Core Scientific, despite that big premium, saw its shares drop quite a bit, around 14.7% initially, down to like $15.48, and even lower later.
Okay. Maybe some arbitrage or deal uncertainty playing out there. But for you and me, the real-world impact is
more compute power. Simple as that. This acquisition means more raw horsepower for all those AI services we're starting to rely on, better chatbots, smarter data analysis for businesses, you name it. It just shows how the foundation of our digital world is shifting fast.
Yeah, the physical infrastructure behind the AI boom. Fascinating. Okay, while they're scrambling for infrastructure here, there's a different kind of AI battle brewing over in China.
That's right. Our second story involves Huawei's AI lab, called Noah Arc Lab. They're pushing back hard against accusations of plagiarism.
Plagiarism in AI models. Who's accusing them?
A research group that calls itself audacity. They're claiming that Huawei's new Pangu Pro AI model isn't original. They say it's basically an upcycled copy of Alibaba's Qin 2.5 model.
Upcycled? That's a loaded term. What's their evidence? This sounds tricky to prove.
Oh, it is. Audacity says they used a new fingerprinting technique. They look deep inside the models at something called the standard deviation patterns of attention parameter matrices. Very technical stuff.
Okay, like a digital signature hidden in the math?
Kind of, yeah. They found what they call an extraordinary correlation, 0.927, between Pangu and Qin in these patterns. They argue this signature is unique and would survive even if Huawei trained the model further.
0.927 correlation sounds really high. Is that kind of analysis widely accepted?
That's part of the debate, but Honest AGI didn't stop there. They also point to nearly identical low-level components, like QKV bias projections and layer norm weights. And here's the kicker.
Uh-oh, kicker.
They claim they found an actual Qin license file inside Pangu's official code repository on GitCode.
Wait, seriously? A license file from Alibaba's model inside Huawei's code? That's pretty specific.
If true, yeah, it's pretty damning. Honest AGI also says they've gotten tips from whistleblowers supporting their claims, even suggesting another Pangu version is very similar to a different model, DeepSeek V3.
Wow. Okay, so how is Huawei responding to all this? They can't be happy.
Not at all. They issued a swift and firm rebuttal. Noah Arc Lab insists the Pangu model was developed independently from the ground up on their own Ascend AI chips.
Their own chips, right, because they're under U.S. sanctions.
Exactly. They can't easily get top-tier NVIDIA GPUs like everyone else.
Yeah.
So they're building their own hardware, the Ascend chips, and they say Pangu was built entirely on that. They also stress they follow all open-source licensing rules.
This feels like more than just a technical dispute. It taps into that whole AI war narrative in China, right? The intense competition.
Absolutely. It's often called the War of 100 models over there. Everyone's racing for dominance. And for Huawei, especially under those U.S. sanctions, proving their independent innovation capability is crucial.
And they just open-sourced Pangu recently, didn't they?
They did, on July 2nd. That's seen as a strategic move to build an ecosystem around their Ascend hardware. If software relies on their chips, they can drive hardware sales and build that self-sufficiency they need because of the sanctions.
So these plagiarism claims directly challenge that narrative of independent innovation.
Precisely. And Huawei's team is also making claims about their tech. They say their Pangu Pro uses a new hybrid technique called Mixture of Grouped Experts, or MoGE.
Okay, another acronym, MoGE versus the standard MoE, Mixture of Experts.
Right. They claim their MoGE approach is better than the standard MoE used by rivals like DeepSeek. They're saying their 72 billion parameter model actually outperforms other big open source models, like ones from Zippo AI and Alibaba's Qin, when run on their Ascend chips.
So they're doubling down. Not only did we not copy, but our way is better.
That's the message. But regardless of who's right here, it definitely raises big questions about transparency and trust in AI development. How do you really prove where a model came from? It's getting harder.
Yeah, verifying provenance is going to be critical. And it's interesting that Alibaba's Quen model is at the center of this. They're a huge player.
Massive. Alibaba's committing something like $52 billion over 3 years to cloud and AI. They're expanding globally, partnering with Microsoft, NVIDIA. Their influence is definitely growing, so this dispute involves two giants.
Okay, so from infrastructure battles to IP battles, our third story brings the threats much closer to home for consumers and businesses. We're talking ransomware.
It's specifically hitting major UK retailers. Marks & Spencer, Co-op, and even the luxury store Harrods have been targeted in cyber attacks. A group called DragonForce is claiming responsibility.
3 big names. That's got to cause serious disruption. What was the impact?
Pretty severe. Marks & Spencer had to suspend online orders and stop all recruitment. Reports said operations were messed up for over a week, staff working around the clock.
Ouch. That hits the bottom line hard. What about Co-op?
They confirmed data was stolen names, birth dates, contact info. Thankfully, they say no passwords or financial details were compromised. Their CEO described the attackers as highly sophisticated. They also had to suspend some services.
Still scary for customers whose data was involved. And Harrods.
They seem to have caught it early or acted preventatively. They restricted internet access across their sites after detecting an attempted unauthorized access. More precautionary, it sounds like.
Okay, so who is this DragonForce group claiming responsibility?
Their origins are kind of interesting. They started as DragonForce Malaysia, a pro-Palestine hacktivist group. But like many hacktivist groups, they seem to have branched out into ransomware, which is, frankly, where the money is.
Hacktivism to cybercrime. But is it definitely them? Attribution can be tricky.
Very tricky. And there's a debate here. While DragonForce put their name on it, actual incident response investigations by firms like CrowdStrike, Microsoft, Phoenix 24 working for M&S point towards another group, Scattered Spider.
Scattered Spider? I feel like I've heard that name.
You probably have. They're financially motivated, thought to be mostly English-speaking, maybe even teenagers. They're linked to that group, the COM, and were behind those huge hacks on Caesars and MGM resorts last year.
Ah, right, the casino hacks. Big incidents. So how does DragonForce fit in if Scattered Spider might be involved?
Well, Google's threat intelligence group noted something interesting. DragonForce recently claimed they took over Ransom Hub. And Ransom Hub is a ransomware as a service platform that Scattered Spider has used in the past.
Okay, wait. Ransomware as a service? Like they rent out the tools?
Exactly. It lowers the bar for entry. So one theory is there might be some kind of turf war or shifting alliances between DragonForce, Ransom Hub operators, and maybe groups like Scattered Spider. It's murky, but it could mean more attacks as these groups jostle.
That sounds like a mess. How do these groups typically get in? What should businesses and maybe even individuals be aware of?
Their methods are pretty standard, unfortunately effective. They often start with phishing emails trying to trick someone into clicking a bad link or opening a malicious attachment.
The classic entry point.
Yep. Or they exploit software vulnerabilities that haven't been patched, things like Log4Shell or issues in VPN software like Avanti Connect Secure have been common entry points. They also use credential stuffing trying lists of leaked usernames and passwords against login portals like remote desktop or VPNs.
So basic cyber hygiene like patching and strong, unique passwords is still critical.
Absolutely foundational. Once they're inside, they use sophisticated tools, sometimes commercial ones meant for legitimate security testing, like Cobalt Strike, to move around the network undetected.
Using the defender's own tools against them.
Right. They install backdoors like SystemBC for persistent access, so they can get back in easily. They use built-in Windows tools like PowerShell or WMI living off the land tactics to avoid triggering alarms. And they use tools like Mimikits to steal administrator passwords and gain deeper control.
It sounds like a planned infiltration.
Yeah.
Then what? Steal data.
That's usually next. They grab sensitive files, customer data, financial records, intellectual property. They often upload it using legitimate cloud storage like Mega or simple file transfer protocol so it doesn't look too suspicious. That data becomes leverage for the ransom demand.
Threatening to leak it if the company doesn't pay.
Exactly. Then the final step is deploying the ransomware itself. They often use these ransomware as a service panels to customize the malware for different systems. Windows, Linux, virtual machine hosts, network storage devices. It encrypts everything and leaves behind the ransom note demanding payment, usually in crypto.
It's a depressingly well-oiled machine. So connecting the dots here, what's the big takeaway for everyone listening?
A few things. First, sector risk is real. When one major retailer gets hit, others in the same industry become prime targets. because the attackers know the playbook might work again, especially with Raise making it easy to launch campaigns.
So if you're in retail or any sector that sees a big attack, you need to be on high alert.
Definitely. Second, it highlights supply chain vulnerabilities. An attack doesn't have to start directly. It can come through a connected partner or vendor. These systems are all interconnected.
And the role of AI. We talked about AI innovation, but it cuts both ways, right?
Absolutely. This is maybe the most concerning dot to connect. Generative AI is making cybercrime easier and more effective. It can write much more convincing phishing emails, create deepfakes for social engineering scams, even help develop malware that adapts to avoid detection.
So AI is lowering the barrier for criminals and increasing the sophistication and volume of attacks.
That's the fear, and we're starting to see it. It means even less skilled attackers can use powerful tools, leading to more attacks that are harder to defend against.
Which just hammers home the need for constant vigilance. Keep systems patched, have strong defenses, and crucially, train people to spot phishing and social engineering attempts. It's an ongoing effort.
It really is. Layers of defense, technology, and human awareness are all essential.
Okay, let's quickly recap the dots we connected today. We started with CoreWeave buying Core Scientific Seat, a huge $9 billion deal driven by the desperate need for power for AI, showing how fundamental infrastructure is becoming the battleground.
Then we looked at the plagiarism accusations swirling around Huawei's Pangu AI model in China, highlighting the fierce competition, the pressure of sanctions, and the growing questions around trust and transparency in AI development.
And finally, the DragonForce ransomware attacks hitting major UK retailers, showing how cybercrime syndicates operate, the danger posed by ransomware as a service, and the accelerating threat landscape amplified by AI itself.
These stories really show the dynamic nature of tech, from building the foundation for AI to fighting over AI creations to defending against AI-powered threats. It impacts the services you use, the security of your data, and the very businesses you interact with every day.
We're here to help it snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.